You didn't hear any of what I just said?
I did hear what you say, honey. I'm just asking.
Oh, okay. We met at Victory Christian Center on Troop Avenue in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay. And
I don't know
so,
if this is. I'm not normally nervous talking to my wife, but I feel like I'm being quizzed here.
so,
I want to make I want to make sure I get these answers right.
so this is the deal, babe. We are doing our podcast and we talk about voices of men, and we want to hear your side of the story because a lot of times we talk about it, and we always hear the women's side of the story. We don't necessarily hear the men's side of the story, and that's why I wanted to hear your heart and where we met.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
So his story is that we met in church. But when we met in church, what did we meet in church and do? Like, hey, Audrey, how you doing?
No,
This is Dennis.
no. In fact, there was nothing like that. There was nothing like that. You
Mm-hmm.
were there to pray. I was there to pray, and there wasn't anything really like that. Of course, at this time in my life, I was kind of really just pursuing which direction the Lord would have me go in. I was doing a chaplaincy rotation, clinical pastoral education over at Robert Wood Johnson. There had begun to surface some thought that there was some ministry opportunity down in Hickory, North Carolina. And then there was Brooklyn, New York, as you always like to tease me about. You tell folks that when I met him, he was moving to Brooklyn, New York with some girl, which was not true at all.
Honey, where were you
But
moving
that,
to when I first met you? Before
well, that's the
Hickory.
point. That's the point. See, it really wasn't, there was no real cognitive thought regarding the deliberate move to Brooklyn, but somehow that kind of became, But the point is, to your previous inquiry, there was no real love connection. We weren't looking for that per se. You were there to pray. I was there to pray, and I don't think that that was on our radar screen at first. At least it wasn't on my radar screen. When I took an opportunity to go down to Hickory, North Carolina, that was on the heels of what I like to say was the Lord speaking to me, stating that you would be my wife, that you would be my wife. And so things progressed relatively quickly in the realm of the spirit, I should say. And I remember specifically saying to the Lord that, Lord, if this is your doing, if this is you, help me to keep my hands out of it. Help me, meaning I didn't want to go around and reveal to you what the Lord revealed to me. And so little did I know that the Lord didn't trust me very much, because that led me all the way down to Hickory, North Carolina, where I was doing some ministry down there. And, of course, I'm saying, Lord, this makes absolutely no sense, because you told me that this woman is going to be my wife. I'm 35 years old. I've patiently waited for this season. And now that you speak this season into existence, you give me the word saying this is what it's going to be. You trust me so little that you send me 600 miles from where she is. So that was a challenge in season, to say the least.
So interesting enough, when the Lord told you I was going to be your wife, where were you? What were you hearing at the time? Were you laying before Him? Were you fasting and praying? Because now, mind you, we really don't know each other, right? I'm at
No, we didn't
VCC,
know each other at all.
right? And I'm down there praying and just want to be found in the will of God. So we talking about relationships. A lot of you guys ask me how I met my husband. This is it.
Yeah, well, there was two places that I used to go, several places really, but two in particular that I used to really go to be still and be quiet before the Lord, to, really just gather my thoughts. And I still actually am fond of going, especially in the summer months. And that is over to Colonial Park here in Franklin Township, Somerset. And Colonial Park has two very specific and beautiful gardens. One is the Rose Garden, and the other is the Perennial Garden. And I used to frequent these, and it was actually there. That was the specific location that the Lord spoke to me. Now, I should digress, albeit briefly. Although I wasn't going to noontime prayer, and this is legit, I was not going to noontime prayer
He is
to
not
see
aware that
you,
he is on
to try to
Facebook. Okay, guys.
persuade you or anything prior to the Lord's. Whoa, what's happening?
Oh, here we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You just came in like, wow, like 10 times louder.
Oh, sorry.
I almost busted my eardrums in my ear pod. That was like really weird.
Oh my
Are we
goodness.
good?
We are good. Didn't mean to bust your eardrum, babe.
Well, thank God. Yeah, so the point was that's where I was. I was at the garden at Colonial Park.
Okay. So a lot of times when we're talking about marriage and when we're talking about meeting somebody for the first time and knowing, the Bible says that he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and I always remind my husband, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. Interesting enough. So when we met, we really didn't know each other. My story is that he was under the tent preaching, and I was singing. And 6 months later, literally almost 6 months later, we got married. And so I was riding down the highway. I'm listening to, what's the song by
Vicky Yowie, I
Vicky
Just Want
Yowie.
You.
Vicky Yowie, I just want you. I just want you. I just want to be in your presence every day. I lay down my will, every selfish desire. By the way, it's a beautiful song. If you get it, you should really get it and listen to it. It has some powerful lyrics on there, and it talks about wanting God's will for your life, and that's what happened. And I remember I was doing case management with Catholic Charities, riding down the highway, literally listening to her. And the Holy Spirit said to me, just as clear, and he would love you like I love the church. And I mean, when I heard that, tears began to literally pour down my face. And from then on, it was just like, okay, one confirmation after the other. And then one night I was laying down in the middle of the night, the Lord gave me a verse. What was it, babe?
The verse was that he would love you as the Lord loves the church was one, but there was another one, so I'm not sure exactly which time you're referring to.
Okay, so here we go. Psalms 118 and 24, I used to always put in there. It says, this is the day that the Lord has made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. But the verse before that says 23.
This is the Lord's doing.
Hey, and it's what?
It's marvelous in our eyes.
That was the beauty in it, right? So that was the confirmation that the Lord gave us. And from there, here it is 16 years later. And I'm sure some of you guys have been married way longer than we have, right? So we have our challenges in marriage. But the reality is I can be confident in some of the things. And my husband hear me say this all the time. When we're going through, I said, Lord, you told me to marry him. And I'm sure he says on the other side when we're going through, and you told me to find her.
Well, you know, honey, we joke about that often, and even now, you're kind of having a jovial moment regarding it. But I always tell folks that that's really one of the most poignant and powerful things that you can utter in prayer, which is, Lord, you said, right? And so how wonderful it is when we have the confirmation of a thing that is the will of the Lord, that is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. Now, to your aforementioned point, it doesn't mean that everything goes well. It doesn't mean that every day is utopia. Whatever the Lord you said is, you could say, Lord, you said start a ministry, and the ministry is floundering. Lord, you said start a business, and you can't meet payroll. Lord, you said marry him or marry her, and there's a rocky spot or turbulence in the relationship. But it doesn't mean that those things won't happen just because the Lord said, but there is great assurity in being able to pray, Lord, you said, because then we hold fast to the truth of scriptures that says, Lord, you that have begun a good work in us will perform it until the day of thy own return. And so I think even though you and I like to joke about that, it's really powerful what you're saying, which is, Lord, you said, this is your doing. You said it, and now you have to provide for it. You have to heal. You have to grow us. You have to mature us. So I really think there's something to that.
And I think it's easier to hang in there with someone that was directed by God. Like, I can give him back things. Like, our marriage has its challenges in several areas, but we choose together to grow together. We choose together. And my husband will tell you there was plenty of times, to be honest, I was packing my bags and the children, put one on one leg and one on the other, walk out the door. And not because he was not a great father or a great husband. I had to get used to understanding that he was covering me, that he was my covering. And that was one of the challenges at 35 and living on my own and paying my own bills and doing my own thing and really satisfied. I was really satisfied. Why are you laughing, honey? I really...
I'm laughing because I'm recalling a couple of doors that got closed in my face. Not mean-spirited, not on purpose, but she had been single so long, she wasn't used to nobody else being behind her or beside her. And so when she got in the door, she just figured all parties were in. And so I walked into a couple of doors,
It was a new
early on
season.
in the
It was a new
marriage,
season.
but so that's what I'm chuckling about.
He's laughing
know.
because when we got married and we lived together, I totally forgot that I lived with somebody because I lived on my own so long. So by the time I opened the door, I would close the door and somebody be knocking on the door. I would say, "Who is it?" I was like, "Oh, forgot, it's my husband."
It's me. Let me in. Behold, I stand at the door and knock.
So really, I had to literally get used to my husband being my husband. Like, wait, who else come in this door besides me? And so,
but you know what, love, you raise another great point. You talk about how you had to become acclimated to the fact that I was your covering, and that's exactly the point from the male perspective as well. I had to realize that I was the covering. I had to realize that there was a responsibility that comes with that. I had to recognize that in order for me to maintain my headship in the home or over you, then I would have to allow God to maintain Christ Jesus to maintain his headship over me. Mm-hmm. How many times have I told young couples in what we call pre-Cana, which is, premarital counseling, couples that are getting ready to, take this big step and go into holy matrimony. And oftentimes in the pre-Canaan setting, the fellow will say to me, "Well, good grief, Pastor, it seems like, all of this is on me." I said, "Well, that's it. That's pretty much the way it works." But the challenge is that when these guys are under the impression, sometimes they'll come and they'll say, "Pastor, tell her." And I said, "Tell her what?" "Tell her what the Bible say." I said, "Come on, brother. The Bible is a big book. It says a lot of things. Get a little more specific. Tell her what the Bible says. Doesn't the Bible say that the head of the woman is the man?" And I'll look at the young lady and I'll say, "Young lady, he's right. The head of the woman is the man." And he gets all puffed up. "And I told you, I tried to tell her. I'm old school. I tried to tell her." And I said, "Well, now, wait a minute, son. Let me tell you something. You got to read the rest. The head of the woman is the man, but the head of the man is Christ. So if you think you're going to remove Christ from headship over you, and then that same God is going to allow you to maintain headship over her and then later children, you got another thing coming, buddy. It ain't going to work that way." So there has to be proper alignment. And I can remember being, somewhat nervous as to whether or not I would adequately be able to cover. In fact, it's something that I still am challenged with today. But by the grace of God, we do it. But by the grace of God, we mature. But by the grace of God, he gives us the ability to do what we only a season ago would have never been able to do by his grace.
A lot of the questions that we get as a couple, let's talk about that. Biracial couple, let's talk a little bit about that. So we are and I always explain this to people, we are a biracial couple, but we are a biracial couple. How do I say it, babe? We are we are an interracial couple, and we have biracial children. Okay,
yeah, right.
So it's one or the other. So I normally say, let's talk about that. How do we handle the differences in our growing up and where we are, and you covering us? And the truth is, we talk about Voice of the Men and we talk about Voice of the Black Men, and we understand that we are raising a black son. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think for us as an interracial couple, we've done well. We had some issues early on, and by issues, that's probably too strong a word. We had a couple of raise of the eyebrow moments, only because I think at the time in 2004, we were probably under the impression that some of what we heard and some of what we experienced was behind us. Yeah. But now as we fast forward 16 years later, we're confronted with it every day as a nation. It seems like, this thing has surfaced and had never really gone away. But at 2004, it really wasn't as obvious and in your face as it is now. So we had some moments like people would say something, or I can remember being in the store the one time we were at the children's store buying clothes, and it was one of those warehouse type places. So we were both bogged down with clothes, and you were in the line before me, and the lady kind of summons me, not putting the two and two together, that you and I were indeed one and that we were a couple. And she's trying to get me to be served before you. I don't know if you remember that. And I'm saying to the lady, no, 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 we're together. And she actually was first, if anything. So that now, with regard to when the children came in, my primary responsibility was to train them and rear them in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I wanted them to love the Lord. I didn't want them to be PKs per se. And, they are pastors' kids, but I didn't want that to be all that they were, right?
Yes.
And then I can distinctly remember, and so they were born, and their mother is African American, their father is Irish, and then I can remember it really never really was an issue. I don't recall. And then one day, somebody that's near and dear to me, that serves as a mentor in my life, who happens to be in a relationship with an African American woman in an interracial marriage and has grown interracial kids. And he says to me, has the question of identity come up with your children yet? And I said, no. And at the time it hadn't. And I said, well, what do you mean specifically? And he goes, well, do they identify as African American? Do they identify as Caucasian? And I said, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't spoken to them about it. But I think we do a pretty good job, and I'm a little biased, of course, but we do a good job of allowing them to be aware of all of their culture. And so not just the African American part of the culture, not just the Irish side of the culture, not just the fact that your father is Irish and Italian, but the fact that so they'll navigate their way. Jonathan's hair is not like his father's thin. He's got hair. He could go to the barbershop and get a fade. I couldn't go to the barbershop and get a fade. So there's different things like that, right? Hannah's features now are changing as she comes into her teenage years, and so too is thing. But what I want them to identify above anything else, or first, is I want them to identify as Christian. I want them to identify as followers of Christ. I want them to identify as people that love God and will serve their fellow man. Then with regard to some of the ethnocentric ideologies and such, let them embrace, let them feel free. One of the things that's interesting is the pigmentation of our children, right? Yeah. They're not light skinned per se. They're just as white as I am. Now, Jonathan is complexion is becoming a little bit more olive, but you got to remember, in my family, I'm the youngest of 11, as you obviously know, but to our listeners, and we're very divided. I've got a brother. My brother Joe is very, you might say, olive complected in that of an Italian or European man. Whereas me, my sister Barbara, we're very fair skinned. It's the Irish in us, right? Mm-hmm. So he'll navigate all of that. But what would happen, let's say, for example, if Jonathan decided that he wanted to go to an HBCU? Mm-hmm. Well, if Jonathan wanted to go to a historically black college and university, or Hannah or Leah, somebody would say, who let the white guy in, right? Just to look at him. Now, of course, as Jonathan started growing up a little bit, what he used to get a lot is, oh, you must be Dominican. Are you Dominican? Are you Latino? Are you Boricua? And this kind of thing. So they'll navigate that. We'll be there to guide them through that. But most of all, I want them to identify with their Christianity. Yeah. And then I think the rest will fall in place. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all these other things will be added to it. Yeah. But at the same time, I certainly don't want them to apologize for who they are.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we get a lot of questions with as a couple or a biracial couple raising biracial children, interracial couple raising biracial children. I think one of the things that we actually, because we're so confident in what the union that God made, and I think that's one of the things that help us a lot is the fact that, even though we used to get side eye, we would hear certain things and people would say certain things concerning our marriage or our relationship, we were confident in what God called us to come into. So therefore, no matter what somebody said or why did she, and I used to get that. And my husband would know, like, oh, why you married that white man, or why you married that black girl, and so we would get this all the time. Literally one time we were in the grocery store True story. And
I'm
my
laughing
husband,
already.
my husband was talking to me from another aisle. And
One aisle over, one aisle over.
literally one aisle over. And I said, yeah, babe, get it, pick it up. Because I don't cook, he cooks, right? I'm not the cook. I need to learn how to cook. And I said, no,
That's
babe.
okay. That's okay. Let's tell the whole story. She's the builder. She'll fix anything in the house. I do the cooking. So
I could put something together.
It works for us. I can't do much mechanically, and she don't do much in the kitchen. So it works for us. God put us together. He knew what He was doing.
So we are in Stop and Shop, and I'm like, oh no, honey, get it. Whatever you need, blah 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 blah. I said, but can you pick up whatever I was asking, right? So literally, this woman is standing next to me in a grocery store, and my husband walks around. And he said, babe, I couldn't hardly, what were you saying? Because, sometimes if he don't get what I'm asking, he'll get aggravated. He's like, babe, what are you talking about? And so the lady literally stopped and said, you were not just talking to that man right there. You were not just talking to that little white man, right? You were not just talking to him. I'm like, yeah, I was. She's like, you were talking to a black man. You were not talking to that man. And I'm trying to explain to her. Right? I'm trying to explain to her, yes, he's my husband. And so, we laugh about things like that. Like when I graduated from college, I'm sitting up there, because we do online, right? So this was 2013, and we go up, and I'm excited about finishing school because, I had my challenges. And I leaned over to the girl, and we were talking, had a good time. I said, well, pause for a picture so my husband could take it. She said, where is he? I said, right there. She said, where? And she smiled. I'm like, honey, just look right there. There we go, right there. And not thinking in my mind, oh my goodness, this girl has no clue. And then I finally had to say, the little white guy right there with the camera. And you should see her face once he shot the picture. So, we get those things. Like he mentioned earlier, we were in the line. And literally, the lady was like, excuse me, ma'am. And I'm like, no, I'm his wife. Like, I'm not cutting. She thought I was cutting the line. And she was really getting indignant. And I'm like, hold up. That's not what was happening. So we get that a lot. We were getting that a lot. So I think raising our children or trying to bring them into reality, I think because we were confident in our relationship and we were confident in what we knew that God told us to do, then it made it easier. I think it because they saw us, weather the storm through it. So they clearly knows he's one nationality, I'm one nationality. I mean, they see the ups and downs. Like a couple of months ago when the things were going through with the brutality on young black men. And my son literally wrote this piece on Instagram, and my heart went out, and it was powerful. He had a blackout, but there were some words that he spoke, and it was so powerful. So I was like, oh, wow. So even though I know he's African American, and he's my son, and he's his son, it was just so powerful for him to be touched by both communities. And it was almost like, I can speak against this because I am African American. So we need to hear the voices of men. So one of the things, ladies, I will say that I get a lot of questions concerning is, and I'm for women live, don't get me wrong. I mean, to the ability of which we can do it. But the reality is I love my covering. And my husband has been a part of my life for 16 years. And because I got married so late, it was difficult. Because I got married at 35, it was difficult at times to hear him. And it was difficult at times because I was so independent in what I was doing, and to be able to relinquish that he cares and that he would cover me and he would do what's best for me. And we were getting to know each other. I didn't know that side at first because we were new. We really didn't know each other. All we had was a promise, and we were giving God back. That's it, all we had. And so 6 months later, here we are, we in marriage. And then a couple of years later, we had 3 kids in the beginning of our marriage, and he lost both parents, and I had one of my parents, and my mom got remarried. So you have all of these things going on. So we became a little family within ourselves because a lot of changes started going on so quickly that I had to depend on him. So when you're talking about you want to hear voices of men, or when you want to adjust to your covering, or when you want to come into a relationship, that's a big part of coming into things, knowing that is this really what you want to do? And I had to a lot of times humble myself. Like I was like, man, I would take your head. I would run away. I would take your head off. And I'm sure he said, I'm gonna take your head off. But we begin to understand that I think with our children involved, I would say this, and my husband could back me up in this area. We tried not to argue in front of them a lot. When they were younger, we tried not to, be disrespectful to one another. Now, I'm not saying behind closed doors we weren't going in, but I think our love for God and our love for one another kind of superseded our differences. Should I say, Bay? Is that the right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I think that's the one thing that does, serve us well. We respect each other. That's a big deal. Going back to what we mentioned earlier, just because you respect each other, or as we mentioned earlier, just because you're convinced that it's the Lord's doing marvelous in your eyes and that, Lord, you said, does not mean that you're immune from some of the normal struggles and strains and turbulent moments of a marriage or a relationship. But we respect each other. Mm-hmm. Now, you are very wise in saying that obviously being in the previous season as long as we were, provided challenges for the new season. 35 years is a long time to be single. You're stuck in your ways, and it doesn't mean by stuck that they're bad ways. Ironically, in my early days of singleness, I was kind of anxious to be married. And I often say this, and my wife, poor woman, has heard this, 10 ways to Sunday. But some of the greatest advice I ever got was after what we used to call a Friday night evangelistic service, and it was from a church mother who sensed this. And, I had preached and the Lord blessed us and we had a great service. And, it was at that kind of reception line where people say, oh, praise the Lord, Pastor, and God bless you. And, you blessed me, or whatever the case may be, even though we all know it's the Lord doing it. And she said, may Mother have a word with you? I said, sure. She said, I sense that you're anxious and you want to be married. And I never will forget what she said. And she was spot on, by the way, in her assessment. And she said, may Mother give you a piece of advice? I said, oh, sure, please, Mother. What is it? She said, embrace and enjoy the season that you're in, because it will, in fact, change. Mm-hmm. And you never want to get to your next season looking back to your last season with regret. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you something, Audrey, when that woman said that to me, it changed my perspective. And I really got into a nice little groove in my singleness. Now, it helps that her word coincided with a better job, and I entered corporate America, was making a couple bucks, had a nicer apartment, and had a better car. All of those things helped me to enjoy and embrace my new season. But, I played basketball in this league over there that night. I went out with my one buddy over to this sushi place on that night. I had a nice routine in my singleness. I knew what my responsibilities were at the church that I was serving in at the time as a minister, and I had a nice thing. So when God spoke it to me at 35, that now this is your wife and you're going to be, I'm like, Lord, now? I mean, like all those years that I was disgruntled in my singleness, I finally get, satisfied in the season that I'm in, and you're going to change it. So, I really would say if there's anybody out there that's in whatever the season might be, it doesn't necessarily have to be interpersonal or marriage or what have you. But Mother was spot on. If you embrace the season that you're in and live it with no regrets, you won't have to look back with regrets. When the season changes and you become a covering, you'll be ready for it. When you become a father, you'll be ready for it because you embrace the season that preceded it.
And you start to realize, one of the things that I started to realize in our marriage, and I'm still, hear my heart, whoever told you marriage cannot and won't be difficult at times, they lied. It will. But you start to realize that you come together with one purpose. And you have, because I was sharing with somebody earlier, I was like, I don't know who told, misunderstand, you bring one half together, another half together, and you make a whole. Women, if you're coming in half and you don't know who you are, you can forget it, because he's going to do a whole on you by himself. And so I realized that. Then I started reading, and I was like, okay, he put a deep sleep on Adam, and he took out his rib, but he brought the woman to him whole. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, he didn't bring back a rib with no flesh on it, without a soul or a heart.
And by whole, I think you might remember this, love, when Bishop took us through premarital counseling. He said it a little bit more directly, and he said it this way.
he said 2 sickos don't make a wellow, right? And so that's your point, which is to say, if you're broken, if you're not whole, if you're not well, the relationship ain't gonna make you any of those things.
Right.
If you think getting a wife is gonna make you well, then I would suggest you stay single. If you think getting a husband is gonna make you well, oh listen, I'm just trying to be nice. My wife will tell you, if you think getting a husband, especially if the husband's wired like me, man, listen, you're gonna have some nights where you're gonna have to fast and pray. So don't think that this is what you need. Don't think this will be the next big fix. If I have this, and this being the spouse, that all will be utopia. That's simply not the case. Be well, so that you come. That's why your mom and my mom took us out to dinner over to the diner before we said I do. And I often tell that story very, very briefly, where in essence, to the listeners, Audrey's mother was trying to make sure that I was aware that Audrey was Black. And for my mother's part, she was trying to make sure that Audrey was aware that I was broke. but they both wanted us to be aware
of something.
In other words, are you both aware of what you're getting into?
Right.
And in mother's case, she was like, "Hey, Dennis, are you up for some of the challenges? I know she's fine, and I know she's got light eyes and caramel complected and smells good, but are you ready for some of the challenges that you might face being married to this Black woman?" And for my mother's part, she was like, "Audrey, are you ready? Because this boy is really broke. Like, you have no idea. He's really broke." So, yeah.
True story. So that's why it's so important that you understand, like, when you hear Voice of the Men, and that's why, I got a great lineup coming up next week. I enjoy what I was sharing. Thank you for those that repeat our podcast. That's what we're doing. So if you just see me, you understand that we're doing a podcast. By the way, he does not know that his voice is on Facebook Live, okay? Until just now.
Oh, I'm calling Mark Zuckerberg. Is that? I think that's a violation. I'm called Zuckerberg. Isn't he in big trouble with the Congress and stuff?
I think I saw it right up. I'm not sure. So
isn't he in hot water? So you telling me now they can't see me, right?
They can't see, but they can hear you, baby.
Oh, that's good because my hair is a mess.
No,
Hallelujah.
Nobody sees you. We just hear you.
Ooh,
even the people on podcasts, all they do is they just hear.
Well, that's wonderful because I just caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, man, and my hair looks like it, quit 7 hours ago. So that's good to know.
No, I just wanted to. So we have a great lineup. We have a couple of people coming next week. I'm really excited about that. And Voices of Men. My husband will tell you, I have a passion. So I have a nonprofit organization called Dare You to Be Different, and then it Reach Children. And one of the things that my heart goes out to, because we have a lot of them at the daycare center, is African American boys and their education, and making sure they're getting it, and making sure we're preparing them to get everything that they need in the world, because of statistics and everything that's happening. So my heart began to go out because I have a lot of them at the daycare center, and more so now that we are actually, some of the sites, our sites are where some of them come to be online school. And the challenge with online school, when you're sitting there and you see a child who's trying to do a problem or a math problem, but they can't read the problem, but they're in 3rd grade. And that's really, what is this program basically about? So the program, okay, so we're going to answer that. Let me answer this. My husband is the co-host. What is the program about? The program, so there's two things. The podcast that you're in is Voices of Men. For weeks, if you go back and listen to some of them, we were talking about hearing the voices of men, your opinion, and how you were nurtured and how you were brought up and things like that. We want to hear your voice. But if you're talking about the program that I have, which is Dare You to Be Different, I would love for you to check out our website at dare2bedifferent.com. Me and my husband always had a passion and outreach for young men or even women or young children, and really being the best that you can be. Dare you to be different, that you would challenge yourself to do something different. Don't beat yourself up. Don't let go of the hurt and the disappointment and start all over again, and how much greatness that you have inside you, right? So even those that's listening to us, whether it's Facebook or whether it's here on the podcast, our purpose and our challenge is to challenge you to do something different and to be the best you can be, because there's greatness inside of you. So if you ever hear me speak, whether it's on Facebook or whether you hear me on my podcast. The reason why I have a passion for men, because I did this research on incarceration and substance abuse and different areas that our men are snatched in and they're webbed in for years. And so when they're trying to do something different or change, society doesn't allow them to do that. And so when I saw my son Jonathan for the first time and I looked into his face, my whole life changed when it came to raising African American boys in today's society. By the way, I waited till I was 35 to get married because I didn't want to be married. I didn't want to have children. And when I was growing up, the world was, it just, and even now, it seems like it was getting worse. And I was just scared to raise somebody in today's society in fear of, Lord, are they going to be successful? Are they going to hit the streets? Or are they going to fall? I had a dad. If you listen to some of my earlier podcasts, I had a dad that died at 52. I'm the age of my dad. I'm 52. And my dad died at 51. I lived 1 year past the year that I lost my dad. And I started to think about my relationship with my dad. And when I started to develop what I needed from him, I was 21 and he died. So I had a challenge, I wanted him to still be here. I knew he loved me. I knew Slugger. People knew who he was. I just needed to know my dad. I wanted him here. And I felt like, man, I've been violated. Like something been snatched from me before I got to know. So when I had my daughters and I watched my husband with my son and specifically my daughters, he has demonstrated to me what I wanted out of my dad growing up. And watching, I never wanted to bring a girl into this world that didn't have a dad that was there. And some men, I want you to hear my voice too. Like, we want you to survive. We want you to develop. We want you to be built up. We want you to be a part of our lives. And so society has beaten you up and tore them down so much that we didn't get an opportunity to love on you, to say, hey, listen, yeah, you may have messed up and we may have made bad choices, and so did we, but where do we go now? And we need to hear your voice of how did you get there? How did you get there so that we can make it available to younger boys or younger African American boys that's out there that's coming up. And we are not just saying, okay, because my kids got it and they're okay and that's all that matters. No, I care about more than just my 3 children. And I'm so blessed to know that my 3 children has shared us for years with thousands and thousands and thousands of young children, And so here it is once again, we're trying to give back. We're trying to hear the voices. We're trying to walk in something so that they can be proud of that. We can abstract the gift or the greatness that we know that God placed inside you. And maybe somebody never told you before that you're great. And maybe somebody never told you that you can make it. And because you were constantly reminded of your fall and the bad things you did, you may have never got an opportunity to hear somebody say, you can make it. And that's what this talk show, this is what this program, that's what my Dare to Be Different is about. You can make it. So often, if somebody fall, or especially a man, if they fall, they adjust differently. And I'll share this and I'll have my husband close this out. One of the things that happened this weekend, right? We own a business. And so one of the people who serve us is African American business that serve our lunches. And I was hitting him up and we were talking. And I noticed that my response to him, he got in his feelings. So he responded to me and say, going forward, I'd rather that you would go and find another vendor. Now, mind you, me choosing him as a vendor to feed our daycare centers was my choice because I wanted to be supportive to this young Black man who stepped out in faith and opened his business. And because I was saying, okay, let's kind of tweak some things so that it could get better. Because I know the struggle where you're trying to, make things stretch or make it work or make it and not you're in your business and not go under. And especially with this difficult year of COVID, I don't want to just snatch my daycare centers from them and say, okay, we're not going to use your food when I know that's a part of your income. And so I hit them back up. I say, listen, if you want me to find somewhere else, it's okay, I will. But the reality is I want you. I want to be there. What can I help to correct it? How can I help to shift us to better so that we can continue to use your services in every daycare center me and my husband open, that you would be the ones. That's how we network. That's how we build one another up. I don't want to tear you down. I don't want to say that we didn't get it right or you didn't get it right the first time. And it was just nobody but God. He texted me back. He was like, okay, sis, let's start all over. I'll be doing it myself. And I didn't want it. I know how it is to start. We know how it is. My husband, listen, there was days I came in crying and laying on the bed and feeling like giving up and saying to him, babe, man, I can't make it. And I needed him. And I think what's happening is society done beat men up so bad. And women, with our women lib, we have just walked all over me. If you do, you don't. I'm a strong woman. Well, I am. Don't get it twisted. You don't make me better, but you do strengthen me. I think we're better together. I could be good by myself, but I believe with my husband, I'm better. And so because I feel that way, I feel that society, we kind of we want them to forgive us, but once they mess up, we want to kill them. Like, okay, you went to jail, okay, goodbye. Oh, you did drugs, okay, goodbye. You had a baby, goodbye. And so I'm not saying, hear my heart, women, because I think y'all would inbox me and go to the extreme. I'm not saying a man should be punching you in the eye. I'm not saying a man should be slapping you upside the head. I'm not saying that he should be sipping with Sally next door. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when you find somebody that actually say, hey, listen, I'm willing to commit to this thing, and I'm willing to, because some of us now, especially that we older, be like, girl, now I'm going to take anybody. No, I'm not taking anybody. That's why I waited and I started to fall in love with God. That's how I end up, my husband ended up finding me. And so I started to realize that, I want to hear your voice. I want to know what you think and where you are so that we can do it together. So by the time I finished talking to him, I was like, dude, I don't want to get another somebody to do the food. I want to support your business, and I want your business to be successful. And if nobody ever told you this is where I end with him. I am proud of you. And I think that's what happened. That's why I always tell my children, and I think that's another reason why they don't struggle with their identity, whether their dad is white and I'm black, or biracial, interracial couples, or black on black. I don't get offended when people go around in social media and post that this is black love, black on black. Well, I still think mine is black love because I'm still black. So I don't get offended. But what I will say is, this is what the program is about. So if you go listen to some of the questions, or what is the program is about, this is what it's about. I have a passion for people. I have a passion for people to grow. I have a passion for you to be the best you can. And I got a passion that no matter what society do, or no matter the hardships, because you will run into some crazy stuff, you have to become firm in who you believe and what you believe in, and in yourself, and know that, listen, there's greatness inside of you. And if nobody ever told you, please hear my voice. It is. And once you start develop in who you are, and you understand that, when you connect with anybody, you're going to be okay. Right, babe?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And, to hear you say that you're proud of me, and to, have that affirmation is powerful. And it really, it should be two-way street. Sometimes I probably fail to say it enough, how proud I am
You're
of
welcome.
you. I'll text you from time to time, and I'll email you even and say, how proud I am of you all. I mean, when you look at the incredible work that you and the staff have done at both of the child care locations, it's really just an incredible testimony to you, to them, to all of you having a willingness to see to it that these children have a safe place, that these families have a place that they can go. So I say right back at you. And I really think that there is something, and we'll end here. I do think, as we mentioned maybe the last time we were on together for the podcast, if heaven opened up at the baptism of Jesus, in addition to the Spirit descending like a dove, there was a voice. And the voice said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." This affirmation, this public endorsement, it is not by accident when we look at the Hebrew portion of Scripture, when we look at the Old Testament, and we see the Father's role in blessing the children, pronouncing the blessing over them, those words of affirmation, to let them know the lineage and the line that they come from, to rehearse it in the ears of their children, to talk to them about the scriptures and the law as they walk along the way. That's what this is about. There's a reason when a young Jewish person gets bar or bat mitzvah, that part of that bar or bat mitzvah is that they've got to recite from the Torah. They've got to be able to communicate from the oral tradition in which they stem. And so to hear you say that encourages me. My prayer is that I say it to you in a way and in a manner that encourages you. And that's really what it's about. But you said something very profound, and I said this the last time we were together. We have to be able to operate in our relationships with a measure of grace. So you can't say just because you messed up, throw out the baby with the bathwater, or because there's a violation in your yesterday, or there's a mistake in your rearview mirror. Man, there's got to be room for grace. And as it relates to the voices of men, you are absolutely spot on that our culture, our society at large, is far more philanthropic, far more forgiving, far more more tolerant regarding the mistake or the folly of a woman than they are a man. A man, they'll label him. They'll say he's a bum. He ain't no good. He ain't never been no good. His father wasn't no good. And if we're not careful, sometimes we'll even have some of our young women communicate this in the presence of their children. They'll tell their children that their father ain't no good. And so we've got to be careful that we give this platform an opportunity to grow, that we allow brothers to know that they've got a voice, to allow them know that they can come on as a guest, to allow them to know that we're putting this platform together as an opportunity to grow them and to mature them so that they might arrive at the place of their purpose. We often talk about God being a God of purpose, and there's no question he is. But what we spend so little time regrettably talking about is that the God that is a God of purpose uses people to pull us into that which he purposed for us. So we have to be careful that we're not missing these very, very vital and critical relationships that will pull us into. Sometimes it could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be a pastor, it could be a rabbi, it could be a boss, it could be a colleague, but God will put somebody in your path. And for me, that somebody was you. For me, I tell folks all the time, I don't need no armor bearer. I don't need no this. I don't need no recording secretary. God was gracious enough to give me a wife. And the last time I checked, that's my helpmeet. That's my helper. And so I'm going to do my part to cover, and you're going to do your part to pray. And I tell folks the reason I still got hair on my head is because I got a praying wife. Oh, yes. Yeah, I got a praying wife. She prays for me, man. She prays for me. I mean, I do use some of your products. I mean, I'll mess around and go put a little shea butter on. I'll mess around and use a little olive oil. I'll mess around and get over to your section of the product.
He be serious.
Oh, yes, I sure will put some shea butter in my hair. I put a little olive oil up in there. And I said, if it could work on her hair and it's so beautiful and all of that, then maybe it could work on my bald head.
So thank you once again, guys. Thank you, babe. Thank you for spending this time.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite.
This hour, like I said, Voices of Men, we got several men coming on next week with us. I'm so excited about it. I'll hit you up tomorrow and let you know who they are. I'm really excited. That they said yes. The reason why.
No, you got to learn how radio works. You got to float it out now, honey. You got what they call in the business. You got to tease it. It's called a tease.
We got the big
you got
guys.
to tease it.
We got my man, Pastor Cox, doing some great things over and where he is with the Safe Haven. That's some great stuff that's going on. They're feeding and sharing families and just doing a lot of great things over in a difficult area where there is crime on top of crime, shooting on top of shooting, and your heart goes out. And we're in the streets. Like, we're not just behind the closed doors and in church. We're out there. We're out there. And a lot of people, that's my dog. Somebody must be coming in. So we're out there, and he's doing some great things. He'll be on. Then I have Mr. Blue. Dennis Blue is joining us next week as well, and we have a couple other names that have. Man, I'm excited. We got a couple of people coming in, and we're going to be excited about sharing the voices of men. I just like to hear things from a man's perspective, and sometimes it's really good because we already have in our mind this concept about men and this concept about where they've been and what they're doing and all that good, that stuff. And so therefore we don't get an opportunity to be a part of our lives, and especially those who are going into relationships and marriage. That's a whole nother thing we'll talk about another time. when we get an opportunity, women, you got to know who you are before you hear the voice of the man that sweet talk you, so you understand what he's supposed to do and what is required. So that's really important. All right, so thank you for joining us. I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you, Bae, for another opportunity. There's several more that we got coming and just waiting for them to send me back the emails to confirm that they're going to be on the show. Thank you for joining us for this last hour. All those that replay, once again, we appreciate you. We thank you. Thank you for the emails, and thank you for the inboxes on Facebook and social media. We appreciate you. Until next time, we are out. All right, Facebook. Thank you for joining us. See you later. All right, honey. Thank you, baby. Hey, guys, that was cool. Okay, he did not know he was on Facebook Live, okay? So those who want to listen to the message, hopefully you were able to hear him. I'm going to check it out and see. If not, please check out the podcast. Check out the podcast from the last couple of weeks. You'll really enjoy it. It's Voices of Men. We got a good lineup coming up next week. I'm so excited. I like to hear your voice. I like to hear your opinion. I like to hear what you're going through so that it can encourage somebody else and build somebody else. Thank you for those who join me on Facebook Live. You know, once in a while it goes in and out, but I appreciate that. And by the way, he did not know. It was just spontaneous. I'll call you in a heartbeat, so you might be next. All right, have a blessed evening, everybody.